Hey, good afternoon. I'm PJ Norwood for Fire Engineering. We're live today with Frank Ritchie, David Polikoff, and a phenomenal guest we have lined up for you, Donnie Hutchison. Before we get started, just wanted to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully you'll get some quality time with family and friends. And also wanted to send our condolences to the Department of Worcester for their line of duty death last week, as well as a line of duty death close to home for me in Westport, Connecticut, where they had an occupational cancer line of duty death to a 46-year-old brother last week. So to both those departments, we extend our condolences. Today's show is going to be a little different twist and things that Dave, Frank, and myself usually do. We're going to talk about kind of like life balance, right? Balancing our personal lives, our work life, and our home life, and kind of bring it all together. This work-life balance is something that, for me, is couldn't come at a better time. For those of you that know, and for those of you that have reached out, I wanted to thank you. The last 5-6 months have been pretty challenging for me with my wife's illness. So this balancing of work and my wife and my daughter and this home life has been extremely challenging for me. So far, we've made it. I've kind of made it through to this point, but I'm really looking forward to learning from Donnie today because, man, I sure know that I probably made some mistakes in the past 5 or 6 months, let alone in the past 25 years of my career in the fire department. There's definitely been times where I felt overwhelmed with home or felt overwhelmed at work. Know that I wasn't keeping up. So hopefully today, Donnie will help kind of bring all that together. And I know for Frank, working neighboring departments as Frank, he's always up to his eyebrows and stuff between department stuff, home-related duties, union-related. So this is something that all of us can relate to. So I want to turn it over to Frank and say hello, and Dave in Maryland, and happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving. I think it's very fitting that it's Thanksgiving week, and here we are on a Google Hangout or a Zoom Hangout talking about balancing work and life. I'm guilty of this, so I'm hoping to take away a couple pointers. This morning, I was talking to my wife, and as I was talking to my wife, I checked my phone. That's a bad thing to do. I need to do better at that. So, Christine, if you're watching, I apologize, but I'm always on my phone. I need to find that balance, and it's extremely difficult. Dave?
Yeah, it's I married a saint, no doubt. I married up. Unfortunately, my wife didn't. She is a hospice nurse, so she knows all about balancing that home life and trying to keep work at work. And it's difficult. And it's difficult in the fire department, being 24 hours or a third of your life. You bring a lot of stuff home. I think Paul Combs' latest cartoon is almost perfect for this conversation about the emotional and baggage that we bring home. So I'm looking forward to learning something. I have learned to, when my wife is talking, mute or pause the TV so I don't get distracted of not looking at her when she's talking, so I don't get in trouble. But I'm looking forward to this conversation as well.
That's a pretty good tip. Mute the TV. But that would have to mean I was actually paying attention to the TV and not my wife or my phone. I could definitely learn from that. But and I don't care what department you work in, whether you're a career firefighter, if you're a volunteer firefighter, we always tend to gravitate towards the fire service, and we kind of push aside some of those important family things. I know I've missed countless family events and countless critical things in my family, in my personal life, because of the fire service, both when I was younger as a volunteer and now as a career firefighter. And there's been plenty of times I've taken work home and I'll be sitting there on the couch at night, with my wife, supposedly watching TV and spending time with her, typing away at a document, doing some QI of some calls, doing something department related. And that's not that balance that we need. So I definitely know it's impacted me. So I'd love to hear from Donnie. And Donnie Hutchison explores self-care and work-life balance qualities that create sustainable success for firefighters at work and at home. He's a published author. Has a great book out in the market, Lead with Balance. I'm sure that we're going to hear about today. So Donnie, welcome, and thanks for joining us on this day before Thanksgiving in November of 2019.
Oh, thank you, PJ, and Frank and Dave, for having me, and look forward to chatting with you guys.
So Donnie, this, you kind of heard Frank and Dave and myself mention that, we're all guilty. And the only way that we've learned to balance work and life is by making the mistakes, right? Not realizing it until our wife gives us that proverbial slap, or sometimes the real life slap across the face. Say, hey, pay attention to me. You not know what's going on here. Or, hey, this is the third birthday that you've missed in a row. None of us have really been educated to even pay attention to that, let alone how to fix that. We've only kind of learned through trial and error. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little about what you do for the fire service and how you can help us, and then let's get into it. We'll see if we get some live questions through Twitter. So if you're watching the show live today, please use a hashtag FETalk. We'll get your question directly to Donnie or Frank or Dave Polikoff, and we'll get this on the road. So tell us a little about yourself, Donnie.
Sure thing. And well, I'm married, and before the show started, Frank was asking me, so which number of marriage are you on? And I think that's actually a really good question too, because no, I've been married twice, and still married on my, of course, my second wife, Marlene. But we've been married for 7 years, and I have 4 children. I have 2 daughters in high school right now. They're sophomores and juniors. And my son just finished with the U.S. Army and coming back home, or back to the home city, if you will, and going to college. And then my oldest daughter's out in Los Angeles going to grad school and finishing up out there. So with that, though, I've always I've gravitated towards this work-life balance piece ever since I first started in my career, which is not in the fire service industry, is in the corporate world. And I've run different companies and different things like that in my past. And one thing that I've always noticed is that I always wanted to have some type of balance, and I always really thought about it. And what balance ended up being for me when I started peeling it back a little bit, it's like, hey, what are your priorities in life as an individual, and how do your day-to-day behaviors match up with that? And that's really where I get into really teaching a lot within the fire service. Is I take you guys through in seminars a lot of different reflection exercises and education, but really peeling that onion back a little bit to say, hey, let's just pause in life for a moment and say, what are our priorities? And PJ, you mentioned that I think is your wife works at the hospice?
No, that's
my wife.
Oh, Dave. I'm sorry. Dave works at the hospice center, and the people that she talks to, and I know this. My father passed away in May of this year, and he had the hospice nurse out practically every other day, right? And to see in the changes that he went through when you sort of realize you're at that point. But it gets down to, I try to get people to start reflecting earlier in life, right? Because we all have regrets. Everybody does. But it's not focusing about the regrets. It's about how to move forward in life and focusing on what are those priorities. Sometimes we talk about who's a priority in our life. We name family and things like that all the time. And then I also try to get people to understand, sort of like what's a priority in life. And I talk a lot about self-care in these workshops, because that's where my research is in. Is that it's about the self-care. How well are we taking care of our physical, mind? Are we eating right? Or you guys of course don't sleep. Your industry doesn't sleep. We know that. But are you exercising? Are you taking your meds that you're supposed to take? And then our emotional care, right? Psychological care. Are we seeking out peer support? Are we seeking out counseling from a competent counselor when we need it? And so these self-care needs, as I try to get people to focus on that, it's like, hey, if we can learn to take care of ourselves, it actually shows that we're better off at taking care of others. And there's a lot of science behind that. But in the fire service industry, as you guys are, it's take charge, and you give, and give. And what I sometimes try to do is say, hey, can we pause and look inward and say, the better I take care of myself, the better I can take care of the community and my family. And I think the fire service is starting, as we go around the health and wellness seminars around the country, we're starting to see that, of course, with cancer prevention and the cardio prevention, and looking at that, as well as behavioral health. We're trying to take a better look at that to say, hey, let's jump on this early, in our careers, and see if we can get ahead of this. And that's what I really enjoy doing, is trying to help educate on that, sort of put the why behind it. Why eat right? Why try to get sleep when you can't get sleep? Why, all the whys behind it. It's like, hey, who's important to you? and are you doing it for them, right? Because as we know, the window of time, it's like I was talking to PJ earlier in the week, is that one thing that I always like to put into perspective is that I mentioned I have my daughters are sophomores and juniors in high school, is that I ask people, I say, what do you need to do now that you might not be able to do in the future, the near future? For me, I have basically 2 years left with these girls, 2.5 years left. Then they go off to college, and then I probably won't, then I see them once a quarter, once every 6 months, right? So what do I need to do? It's like the day after Thanksgiving, I'm going to go watch my daughter cheer at her varsity basketball game, right? Friday night, first game, I'll be there. Go to the football games every chance I get. So I try to make all these different type of events, the soccer games, watch my other daughter play soccer, or sometimes just, hey, what are you girls doing? Go grab them and say, let's go out to eat together. Let's just spend a little time together. And because I have it in my mind that's like that window's closing. So I try to take advantage of it. And so I try to get others to start thinking about that in their lives. What is it that window of time is going to close on you? To get others to start prioritizing things in their life a little bit. I guess what's important to them is that they actually start putting behavior behind it.
Frank?
Well, no, it's easier said than done. But I mean, one thing that I could definitely point out is that we all think that we're not going to retire or stop volunteering or whatever's going to happen, but the end comes up quicker than we all think. It seems like the first 16 years goes by slow, and then after that, it just flies right on by. I mean, I'll be probably retiring in July, and the fire department's gone in a sense. You're the retired guy showing up to everything, right, and you're there with your family. So I think you do need to invest more in your family. I think across the board, we all need to do a better job with that.
How about you, Dave? You may have a little different perspective with your wife's, work. You kind of probably hear the stories from your wife for other families going through a tough time in their life, or from, the patients that she's dealing with. So I'd be interested in if you have a different perspective as far as how it impacts us from your wife.
It definitely gives me, since she's been a hospice nurse, I am the person that she can come home to and talk to and tell stories. I mean, the stories are terrible, but I mean, she, like a firefighter, being a hospice nurse is a calling, and not everybody can do it. And God bless her, she's really good at what she does. She's been nationally recognized for what she does. But I have to be that sounding board. I have to be the person that she can come home and just unload on about all the things that are going on. There's a lot of bad stuff happens. You can't unload to the families that you're taking care of. So I've learned to be able to not just hear what she's saying, but also listen to what she's saying. And that comes down to pausing the TV so there's no outside distractions, because what she's telling me is to her it's important to get out. And I have to be the one to listen. Just like for the last 20 some years that we've been together, she hears all the things that's happening at work on my end, the frustrations and the things that I deal with. And so I have to be that person that can give back to her. And I think that's the divorce rate in the fire service is astronomical. It's horrible because of the amount of time that we're away. Now, my wife knew what she was getting into when she married me. For the fire service, not for the other stuff. But she definitely understands, what I go through, and I'm doing my best to understand what she's going through, just to moreover just be there to hear what she has to say, not solve any problems, just hear what she has to say. And I think that's what's important. And for the kid aspect, I have young kids. I have one that's 11, and the other one just turned 15, and so I do my best to try to, do things with them at home as well. But it doesn't always work out that way being on shift work. So I know that as my daughter gets older, she's going to want to do other things. But yeah, it finding that balance is difficult.
Donnie, now you still have to have the balance at work, though. So it's you can't just say, hey, I'm going to my kid's game for the whole entire thing, or I'm going to hit this event every time, because you still have responsibilities at work. So something my father taught me, and I'm sure these guys have heard me say it before, and it's worked really well for me, is that if I'm in the state and I'm invited to something, I try to show up to every single thing that I'm invited to. That's one of the prices of leadership. But unlike the past where I'd be invited to something and I would stay, my dad always said, show up to everything, but leave early enough so they could talk about you behind your back. And most people don't know how long you stay somewhere. Just showing up and doing the Irish goodbye of walking out is it works. I did a recruit graduation the other night. I made sure I was seen. I said hello to everybody, gave a horrible speech, and then as soon as I was done, I darted off the stage and left and went home. So nobody even knows that I left. So can you comment on that, Donnie?
Oh, I completely agree with you, and I've used that also with my own children. Sometimes, show up right at the beginning of a game or right before it starts, say hello to her, wish her the best, and I have a meeting I have to go to, and so I get out of there. And there are other times, though, Frank, I know that as being leaders, we just can't be everywhere. And that's the thing; we can't be in two places at the same time. And one of the things I try to teach too is that, and I think a lot of times people do a good job of this, is that if you can't be somewhere, and especially if it's with your child or something like that, it's that phone call after, it's checking up on them. Hey, how did that event go? Or when you're coming home at night or something like that. It's still it's engaging with them on that particular event that they happen to experience. And even though you can't be there, but to show them that, that it's still on top of your mind, and you're thinking of them. And I think that I know that goes a long ways with my own children. And but it's with the time schedules of being leaders, it is very challenging of being pulled in many different directions. And I think some of the things that we were talking about, Dave, you mentioned that sometimes, or we pause that TV and we try to focus on the person. And I think that's part of that, being mindful of your surroundings. And we're all guilty of, of course, being on this all the time, right, and checking that. But sometimes having that self-awareness to start thinking, okay, I have to put this down, or I'm going to mute it. I'm going to have this conversation with the person in front of me. It probably doesn't take that long to have that conversation, but at least it's sometimes we can get into these little habits of how can we try to just zero in on the person we're talking to and give them our undivided attention, because I imagine you guys have experienced this with your spouses as well, right? I mean, when you give someone that undivided attention, it goes a long ways. Plus, it's always nice too, even in our leadership roles that we have, is giving that person that is asking for advice or asking for some assistance, is giving them that attention as well. I think it goes a long way, but it's a habit though. It's something that needs to be. It takes time to develop and practice. But there is no perfection in this. That's where I try to tell people. I go, I try to get people not to focus on, oh, I want to live this great balanced life. No, it's not about that. It's really about, hey, what few things can you change to try to get the trend going upward, the trend getting to where you're feeling better about things, and your spouse and people you work with, people are feeling a little bit better because you're practicing some new strategies, if you will. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think Dave's tactic there is a good one of pausing the TV. Also, something that our spouses could do is actually kind of like when you call somebody on the radio, right? Say that they're going to be talking to you, because people don't multitask. And if I'm reading an email or I'm watching Fox News, yes, I said it, Fox News. If somebody doesn't grab my attention first, I generally aren't paying attention to what's going on around me. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap is your spouse walks in a room and they just start talking. And she's already halfway through her conversation. And I haven't even started listening to her, never mind paying attention to her. So that's something right there that I think the spouse can do. See, union guy. Blame it on somebody else.
And Dave, when I've tried the pausing the TV, right, when my wife starts talking to me, but it had an opposite effect of what you're experiencing.
I
My
know
wife, my wife said, "Are you pausing that to listen to me, or just because you don't want to miss what you're watching?"
it's. I think I do it because I want to be able to face and listen to her. She told me a story, and you can look it up. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but it's more about a girl that had a nail in her head, and she was talking about how she has this excruciating pain in her head. And then her husband's like, "You have a nail in your head." "No, you're not hearing me." And at the end of the story, it's not about the nail. It's just that they want to be heard. And I think it's important. I preach it at work right now. I'm taking on this leadership study that I'm doing. It's all about communication. 85% of the problems we have in the fire service is lack of decent communication. And it's the same thing at home. If you find that you're not listening to your significant other, eventually you're not even going to be talking. And that's a bad road to go down.
Yeah.
So I try my best to make sure that when she's talking, I am listening to what she's saying. There are times that I am watching TV while she's talking, and then she'll get mad and say, "You need to listen to me." And I said, "I heard everything you said." And I regurgitate everything back to her, and you at least could look at me. So you can't be right. In marriage, there's a saying: you can be right or you can be happy. You can't be both. So, and that's a joke between my wife and I. But I do my best to when she's talking to hear what she has to say, because there are a lot of things that go on in her life, and when I'm gone for 24 hours, just like when I talk to her, she's listening. So it's a mutual thing. You got to respect each other.
Donnie, I got a direct question for you. How do you stop somebody in your life? Everybody out there has either a spouse, daughter, next door neighbor that's a teacher. And as a profession, very honorable profession. But when you talk to them, they talk to you like they're talking to their class, and they repeat themselves over and over again. I want to listen, but you got to stop saying the same thing over and over again. How do you politely transition that conversation so I can get back to checking my email?
Frank, I'm not sure if I'm the best one to answer that question. My wife's a fourth grade school teacher.
You're not trying to go for marriage number 3, is where you're delicately saying right now.
So kind of
Yeah, but how many times do I need to hear this? I got it, even when I told her, "Here, let me repeat what I heard." No, she just wants to tell me again.
So Donnie, sitting back here and listen, there's, picking up a lot of little tips and tricks and suggestions, which I really like to get to, because I think that we could all benefit from that. But you said something in the beginning, like peeling that onion back. And I think that this issue is one of those issues that you won't find a firefighter that will say that this is not an issue for them. But I would tend to think that there's a reluctance for the majority of the fire service to actually begin addressing it. So if we have some company officers watching, if we have some chief officers watching, how can you educate them to help break down those barriers and help decrease that reluctance of firefighters to realize, because I think that's the first thing, is to realize that, hey, this is a problem for all of us, so then they can begin addressing it.
Yes, and it needs to start with the recruits, and it needs to start in the original training classes, I believe. I mean, that's one place, but as you know, changing a culture of organizations, as we all know, it's extremely time consuming and difficult. And when I ask you guys to, in my seminars, is to, I literally get 200 of you, and I get you to close your eyes, and, I play a certain song for you, and I'm going to ask you, hey, let your mind go wherever it goes, and then we're going to talk about it. Getting you guys to reflect is not the easiest thing to do, because a lot of times you don't want to reflect. You don't want to sit back and think about a lot of the unpleasant things. And, but that's where we have to start. And how do we get people to do it? I think it's just a constant encouragement from leadership to try to get people to say, really work on, after you have that experience, pulling together and talking about those experiences, or giving people time enough to allow them to come out and share it, on their own is obviously the right way to do it. But it's that constant encouragement to let's talk about things, especially around the table, right? When we talk, and really try to make that table the big therapy session, if you will, is around that table. And one way that I have found, and I try to teach others in doing in my leadership, is that one of the best ways to get others to do it is just lead yourself and start leading by example and sharing what's going on in your life and sharing the struggles that you have. We a lot of times, we put ourselves up as leadership and think that, oh, we're supposed to have this perfect life, or people look at me and supposed to think I'm supposed to have this perfect work-life balance and things like that. But things are still, they're challenging for all of us leaders, we that are experts, so-called experts, right? It's always challenging. But I think if we put ourselves out there and share it with others and talk about our struggles and get personal, be open with it, I think that could go a long ways into helping others in that, in that department to really maybe feel more comfortable to also share.
And Donnie, and I could relate to that. So I'm one of five children. So I grew up in a very large family. Both parents worked multiple jobs. All my siblings are much older than I am. So the one day a week that my father required us all to be home was Sunday afternoon for Sunday dinner. And we didn't have to worry about cell phones back then, but we all sat around the kitchen table. That was the only thing he would really require all week long, is that we sat around the kitchen table. We talked about our previous week and what's coming up that week. Now, I don't have that big of a family now. I have one daughter, 17 years old, but we've always made it a priority at dinner time, whenever we're actually all there, which isn't every night of the week, but to leave the cell phones out of the kitchen area and actually have a conversation, whatever it may be. It may not be reflection. It may not be what's bothering us. It may not be a therapy session, but just having conversation, not interrupted by the cell phone. We let the house phone ring. If it rings, the cell phones ring, they ring, and we just have that conversation. I've talked to some leaders in the fire service where they've modeled that in the firehouse kitchen. Now, we all know, Dave and Frank know how important and rewarding and enjoyable, and also that sometimes incriminating, those conversations around the kitchen table at the firehouse could be. So I've talked to some leaders who actually institute that rule in their firehouses. As a new lieutenant or new captain or chief officer, around dinner, breakfast, or lunch, around the kitchen table in the firehouse, no cell phones. Leave them at the door, because the kitchen table is such an important part of the fire service culture, and not being interrupted, like you said, with your cell phones, I think is a really good way to start learning to have those conversations, especially for the recruits coming into the firehouse, these 19, 20, 21-year-old kids who may not have had that guidance or direction at home, and maybe actually struggle having a conversation with more than one or two people, let alone their shifts. I think that's a good trick, for at least for me, that's worked in my family life to help break that barrier. And I tell you, we've had some great conversations with my daughter sitting around the kitchen table at home.
Dave, do they got cell phones at the table where you work? Or something you try?
They do. In the two battalions that I work, I eat at the stations where I'm assigned. But for the most part, especially during lineup, I try. I don't get into their lineups. Every now and then I'll walk in when they're at the tail end of their lineups just to hear what they have to say. But I'm noticing that they're spending a little more time at the table during their lineups and talking about stuff, whether they're doing a quick streets drill or they're just there. They're not on their electronic devices. Same thing at dinner time. Everybody sits down. We try to eat. I'm assigned to two busy stations that run a lot of calls, but they do their best to make sure that we're having that dinner conversation or that lineup conversation. And I'm a huge fan of kitchen table talk, because that's, to me, is the great equalizer. There's no rank. Everybody's talking respectfully. Everybody has an opinion. They have a question they can ask. Even the rookie, if they have a question, they should never get the side eye or the shut up and keep your ears open, your mouth closed. It goes a long way. And the Generation Z that's coming in now, that's all they know is electronics. They want information immediately, and to be able to get them to try to unplug is kind of difficult, but it's essential, I think, to understand what's going on at the kitchen table, because there's a lot of information that's passed around the fire service, and there's a huge age span. So I think that being unplugged at the kitchen table is important. I don't think you're going to see them not have their phones with them, but at least not on the table in front of them scrolling through it while dinner's going
And I think another tactic that you can use that I started using recently is we got to realize we're all replaceable. And the fact is, the fire service will still operate once you're gone. So, do you need to be at every meeting? You know, my vice president of the union, he led a negotiation meeting yesterday, and he's like, "Well, do you want to call and be on speakerphone?" I'm like, "No, if I wanted to call and be on speakerphone, I would have been there." I'm driving to DC. I have full faith in him. So it's also to strike some balance. You can also build the people underneath you at the same time you're striking balance. So someone's there representing your organization, and you can kind of pick and choose when those times are. But it's a good way to build the personnel that are coming up that are going to replace you. Donnie, you want to speak to that?
No, I completely agree with you on that. And I was just thinking of when you were talking that I've received over the years that one of the things that I mentioned in my training classes is that can you put, and these are mostly union officers, so the shift work is a shift work, but it's all the other work, the phone calls that they take, and all of you guys take and things like that. Is that I would challenge them. I say, can you put the phone down for family dinner? PJ, like what you're speaking about there, is that, and they said it's very, very difficult, and because I'm here to serve. And I said, I get it. However, and then what I recommended was, I said, maybe you could try to, I said, just experiment with it, because I think people, as leaders, people want to be heard a lot of times, right? We need to be accessible. They need to be able to reach us. But if they understand that, hey, I'm going to put my phone down for an hour, whatever it might be, from 1800, 1900, whatever. But if you would communicate that out, right, to your organization, and maybe it's just 2 nights a week or whatever it might be, my phone's going to be down for an hour, but I guarantee at 1900, I will pick it up and I'll read every text, or I'll listen to voicemail, I'll do whatever I need to do, and I will get a call or a text or anything right back to you right when I finish that dinner. And it's sort of setting those expectations for others, and because that's really what someone wants. We need to get a hold of someone. It'd be great if someone said, hey, I'm tied up until this time, but I will get back to you as soon as that time is over. And we feel heard, and we also know that our problem's going to get addressed. And I think that's been very helpful. And I have received feedback over the years on that from people that have experimented with that. They said it actually has worked very well, and it has made their home life a little bit happier because, of course, the phone's not at the table. So that's a little bit on some of that has worked over the years that I've noticed. And but I think there's always ways to experiment with it and try to figure out how do we balance this. And it's always a challenge.
The phone companies keep setting me back too, because before you could actually shut off text messaging on your phone permanently, and I didn't get text messaging for years, and it was the best thing ever, because people will text you the dumbest things, and you get involved in all these dumb conversations that just take away from that very balance you're trying to strike. And now that the phone companies, you can't opt out of getting text messages. So I find myself in all these needless conversations all the time that actually take time away from work and take time away from family life. And I got to talk to PJ more. I got to talk to Dave more. So it's convenience, but it's also like a chain too. It's that, okay, how much needless stuff do I got to comment on that doesn't pertain to work or family? PJ's the minister of propaganda. I don't even know how he manages his life with all the social media and everything he does. So PJ, you could probably weigh on this, because I think you do a good job of actually balancing your home life or work life, because there's plenty of events that you say, hey, I got to go to my daughter's softball game, or I got to do it. I think you actually are an example to the fire service, PJ.
Well, thanks, Frank. And I thought that I did a fairly decent job at being in all those events and not missing stuff, especially for my daughter. But the last 6 months have proved very different for me, and I have a very different outlook. everybody always tells you that your kids grow fast. And like Don mentioned in the beginning, my daughter, Riley's graduating from high school this year. She just committed to college. I know when she's leaving. I wish I realized that a little bit earlier, but unfortunately it took, my wife getting sick this year and my daughter becoming a senior in high school for me to really pump the brakes. Frank, when you mentioned the social media, the stuff that I do on social media now is probably 1/10 of what I was doing 2 or 3 years ago, especially within the last year, because I really try to put that away and realize that, I'm not going to change anybody's mind with my information from Fox News, as you mentioned earlier. Everybody's going to have the same opinion that they had at the beginning of the day, regardless of what I tweet or regardless of what I put on Facebook. So I try to keep it a little bit more focused and actually share things that I truly believe in. And of course, stir the pot every once in a while, because it wouldn't be fun without that. That's my entertainment. But I have really scaled that back because, some of the social media platforms that I've created in the fire service for Sean Gray was really taking up a lot of our time. We have a Facebook page that has 100,000 followers now. It's very challenging to manage that alone, let alone everything else. So we've got some other people involved and other people really helping us monitor those pages and contribute. And to help balance that, we have automatic content. I'll sit down once, 2-3 days every 6 or 7 months, and I'll schedule content for the next 6 months. So it's almost like a set it and forget it, except for the monitoring piece. So there's definitely tools that you can use to help manage your social media if you're running a social media platform for something else, for a business or for marketing or for teaching. There's ways to manage that through other platforms that you can pre-schedule stuff. So I've really gotten away from that daily. Holy crap, we got to figure out, well, what are we going to post today? Oh, we got to post something tomorrow, because in order to keep those pages live and entertaining and educational, you have to have content every day coming out. So that's one way that I've worked around it. But just realized this past 6 months that I shut the phone off too. And I'm not afraid anymore to shut the phone off. And whether it's, excuse me, the department phone that's issued or the personal phone, I'll shut it off. I'll put it on mute, put it on charge in the kitchen, forget about it after I get home from work for 2-3 hours. Sometimes I kick myself in the back and say, oh, I missed that. I should have really paid attention to that, because there are some important things. But I've really realized, Frank and Dave and Nani, that there's nothing more important than my wife and my daughter. And I've really, unfortunately, have had to learn that the hard way. But I don't allow that stuff to interfere with my home life anymore. My wife will probably still disagree a little bit, but yet it's really, learn it from me, firsthand example, and I've learned the hard way. Life is really important. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Dave.
I agree, and I think the lesson really hit home for me right before my son was born. I ended up transferring out of station. We had a lot of inner conflict going on at the station that I was assigned to as a captain, and ultimately I could see it took a while that it was coming in between. I was bringing my work home, and not in a good way. So I just decided I'm transferring to a different station, and I did. It was the best thing I ever did. And then the next thing, like 3 years later, I got promoted to battalion chief, which was even better, because now it's like, oh, well, you missed that fire. I'm like, whatever. I wouldn't have been there anyway. It wasn't my shift. As opposed to missing a fire at your station that you're assigned to, and you might be bummed about it, but I think it's definitely gotten better for me. But my kids are young, and I want to make sure that I'm there for the things that they're doing, and whatever direction they decide to go, try to be a part of that. And same thing with the home life. With the wife, you had mentioned that having that contact every Sunday after we put the kids to bed. My wife and I sit down and we just go through our schedule, what's going to go on for the next week, and our calendars are linked, so we can know what each other is doing. So it's definitely helped out to be able to keep work at work, and then whatever's going on at home, and if it does cross over, we can talk about
And I think we could sit around here all day long and talk on, all the easy ways that we can fix this, right? Because like Donnie mentioned, we're the experts. We can fix anything. But I think it's hard to actually achieve that for some of us. Maybe not for us around the call today, but maybe for some of those at home listening. So Donnie, what do you have for tips or tricks, right? So we have about, 10, 15 minutes left of this call today, especially in honor of Frank and your time and Dave's time, my time approaching Thanksgiving, as well as our listeners. They want to kind of get down to the meat and potatoes here, right? So what can they do today? What are those tips or tricks that they can start putting in place today, especially tomorrow, Thanksgiving? What can they do different to help balance that at home?
There are a couple things I'll talk about on that. One is to spend some time in reflection and just answer the question: who's important to you? What's important to you? And then how have you shown them that they're important? How are you demonstrating that? Are you or are you not? Probably a little bit of both. But to spend some time reflecting on, or reflect on the question: what do you need to do now that you might not be able to do in 2 or 5 years, or whatever time frame is relevant, right? As I mentioned, for me, it's my kids, or someone may have an elderly parent that that window's shrinking, or whatever it might be. But there's a time element, so reflect a little bit. But then, like, one of the tricks, though, too, is that, and what I have found in the fire service, and actually people in general, is that we all live with a certain amount of guilt. We feel guilty about our past mistakes. We feel guilty about how much we're working, about not putting our phone down, or we're overweight, or our marriage isn't that good, or we haven't been that close to our children. There's people live with a lot of this guilt, right? And so what I ask people to do is to learn the art of self-forgiveness. And it took me a long time. I learned it when I remarried about self-forgiveness, because it's one of those things where my wife Marlene actually taught it, because I remember I screwed up on something and said, "Hey, honey, I'm really sorry about this," and she goes, "Hey, no problem." But I was sort of like moping around on one Saturday afternoon and told her I was sorry a few times. And then finally she dragged me in front of a mirror and she goes, "Hey, you already told me you're sorry. Now tell the person in the mirror. You just need to forgive yourself and move on, because I've already moved on." So I was like, wait a minute, this whole thing about self-forgiveness, what is that? I grew up Catholic guilt, right? You never are supposed to forgive yourself, right? So you go to confession. But it's one of those things where it's like, I think it just ingrained in me, right? So sometimes you carry that stuff around, but I encourage people to forgive themselves. Others have forgiven you. Now forgive yourself. And what can you do now to make your life better? And I try to get people to understand, we are the architects of our life. We get to design it. We do get to choose what our priorities are in life. It is our choice. Now go choose, and then try to just take a few things. It's like anything when you want to change. It's like, hey, let's just practice. Let's take two things that are important. I want to start putting my phone away at dinner time, and I want us to have more family conversation. Well, if that's it, then just master that. Create a new habit and work on it until it becomes a habit. And then you may go back to the reflection piece. What else could I improve? And you just start taking it one step at a time, 1 or 2 new habits at a time. Because as we all know, habits are very difficult to build, and our poor ones are hard to break. So that's a big piece of it, is that reflection, and then reset by learning to forgive ourselves, and then learning how to rebalance by just taking 1 or 2 new things and starting it. But another thing that I'd like to share with you guys is that this whole concept of self-care, and that's where my research and in my PhD work is about: how well do we take care of ourselves and meet our self-care needs, and how does that attribute to how balanced we are in life? And my studies have shown that the more we take care of ourselves, the happier we are in all of our roles in life. And so I try to debunk the myth that you have to choose success at home or work. I believe, and the research is starting to show, that the more we take care of ourselves, we can be successful in both elements of our lives. And this thing called spillover. And I'll give you a quick example. It's just like, you guys know, if you think about it, after you exercise, or you go on a run, or go to the gym, or whatever exercise you might do, you feel better afterwards. You're more relaxed. Your mental energy is better. You can think clearer. Sometimes people are more creative after the exercise. But then we call that a positive spillover. What you do in one role can positively spill over into another role. We become less stressed when we go home. versus the other, we always are aware of our negative spillovers. We have a tough day at work and we bring those struggles home, right? And we're more irritable if we don't sleep. We're out on calls all night. We don't sleep. We go home. We haven't slept in 24 or 36 hours. We're irritable. It spills over. And to learn how to try to mitigate those, right? And to learn, hey, how can I get more positive spillover in my life? What can I focus on? And how can I mitigate some of this negative stuff? And I think that's really, really important. But it takes conscious thought, and it takes, like anything, it takes putting a plan together, keeping that plan in front of you, and working it all the time.
I think that's some great advice. Frank or Dave?
One thing they do in New Haven that I think is pretty cool is that we all know the holidays are coming up and Christmas is big, especially with individuals that have small kids or new grandkids. So, if your department's not doing it, most departments can do mutuals or special leaves where they work for each other. And from the time that I came in New Haven, it always seemed that the older guys or the younger guys would work for the guys that had kids or girls that had kids for Christmas morning. And then the trade-off was that they would work New Year's Eve for the younger people. So they kind of found a balance right there that works. Do they do that in Montgomery County? Is that a common switch?
I did that. My wife and I, we had kids a little later in life. We were in our 30s when we had our kids. So I would always go out of my way to work for some of the guys that were a little older than me that had young kids at home. Then my wife did the same thing for some of the nurses that actually had kids at home. So we could be there to work for them. And then they could go home and spend that time with their family, knowing that in the future, the roles were going to change. Their kids were a little older. And now that my wife and I have younger kids, I'm senior enough now that I get whatever leave pick I want anyway. But, she doesn't have to work Christmas because, she's done that before. Some of the other people can pick up that slack. So, yeah, we do go out of our way to do stuff like that. And even when people get injured, even off the job injuries, we've had it so we could work for them. Our buddy RJ, when he tore his leg up really bad, he was off work for 5 months, and he only had to take 10 hours of sick leave in that 5 months because everybody was doing those mutual trades for him. So it all comes out in the wash. That allowed him to focus on getting healthy and for his the time fiance to take care of him and him to heal so he could get back to work. So yeah, absolutely. Got to work with each other in the fire service in order to achieve the balance of being able to be home with the family with the younger kids too.
Excellent. So Donnie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your book, and then tell us where our followers and our listeners, whether they're live or they're listen to this in the recorded version, could learn more. You mentioned that you talk to firefighters, give some seminars and some education stuff. So where can those followers or listeners today learn more and maybe get an opportunity to listen to you firsthand, as well as a little about your book that maybe they can pick up?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Well, people can learn more. So, easiest way is through my website of DonnieHutchinson.com. And there's a video on there, explains 3-minute video, promo video, sort of explains how the workshops are orchestrated and things like that. But it goes into types of speeches and workshops that I do. And my book is called Lead with Balance. And this was written at a time right when I was just getting started into the fire industry. It is not a firefighting book. It is not geared towards that, but it is about lead with balance. And the subtitle is How to Master Work-Life Balance in an Imbalanced Culture. But it talks a lot about what Frank and Dave, you were just talking about, how do you change up, get to know your members, get to know your team members, your brothers and sisters, and get to know what are their needs, as you mentioned, at Christmas time and New Year's Eve and things like that, and switch up. And the book is a lot about, part of that is how to lead is to identify those needs of your team members and help meet them. And then that helps a way for everyone to get balanced. But the book in itself is built on 4 pillars: faith, family, career, and health. And how to have those 4 pillars in your life that when the ball drops in one, life's not that good at all. Pick one, doesn't matter, faith, family, career, or health. But unfortunately, like in the fire service industry, we're seeing the health piece is something that we are doing. We're trying to focus more and more on that. And I think rightfully so, and I'm glad to see it, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
That's some excellent information. I think that I'm going to have to pick up a copy of your book because I can probably definitely use a little bit more education to make me a better person, which will help at home.
PJ, he said he was sending you a free copy, so you're all set.
Oh, okay, good. I missed that part. I was just kind of throwing that out there again, Frank.
I think Frank was saying that that I was going to send all listeners a free copy. He's going for that next.
Well, Donnie, the good thing is that means you got to send my mom one book, so you're good.
So kind of staying with the theme, and so we can all find a better balance with work and life. It's 10 to 2, so I think it'd be good to maybe finish this call up a few minutes earlier today so we can all get back to work or to our families. But before we do so, go around the table and give Dave Polikoff give you a chance to kind of sum up what your last few words.
Yeah. Again, I think that this is a pretty timely discussion with the holidays, and gives us a chance to actually reflect back on family. And I think Frank said at the beginning, when we retire and we leave the fire service, it's still going to be there. It's still going to move forward whether you're there or not. But your family, that's what's important. And when the kids grow older and they move away, the time that you should have spent with them is gone. So we need to take advantage of that now.
I think we can all do better. I mean, the fact is, I know I can do better. I got to put down the phone. I got to pay attention. I got to listen, and you got to show up to more things. And I did learn a new trick because I always like to break it back down to the tactics, especially like if you go to a lacrosse game, that's really fun to watch. But say if your kid plays track and you just got to get through track. I realized the other day at an event that a Dunkin' Donuts medium coffee cup fits exactly one can of beer. So just for all our viewers out there,
just saying,
it really works.
I keep telling you, you need to make the switch to Starbucks. You can fit 1.5 in there. You'll be better off.
Then you have to buy the cheaper beer because the Starbucks is way more expensive.
Yes, Dave knows.
Donnie?
Well, it's been quite an honor to be on here with you guys, and I think I'm glad to hear that leadership is taking an interest in this subject, and it is such an important thing because at the end of time, what do we have? And it's about those relationships in life and how we've contributed to others and how we've helped others. And I'll leave everyone with sort of the way I define work-life balance, and it's simply asking ourselves, are our day-to-day behaviors in alignment with our priorities in life? And we just pause and think about what are those priorities and what are our day-to-day behaviors like? And if they are, fantastic, keep moving, keep doing it. If they're not, what can you adjust? And so I'd like for you to just ponder that for a little bit. And again, I appreciate being on the show and sharing the message.
Donnie, can you hold up your book to the screen?
Sure. Yeah, it can be found on Amazon.com. It was the #1 new release for Amazon a few years ago. And Lead with Balance.
Terrific. PJ, you want to take us off?
Thanks. Yeah, Donnie, thank you very much. Dave, Frank, thank you very much. I hope each and all of you have a great Thanksgiving and you find that balance to be with your family and enjoy it. Happy Thanksgiving from all of us. Frank and I won't have a show in December because it falls on Christmas Day. So for all our faithful listeners, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And as always, we thank Fire Engineering and Chief Bobby Hall for giving us this opportunity each and every month and giving us this platform to bring great guests like Dave and Donnie on to help educate us and give us some tips and tricks to be better firefighters, better officers, and better people. So thank you very much, everybody.
PJ, I also encourage everybody this Thanksgiving to discuss politics at the dinner table. I know that everybody says don't discuss politics, but if you're just talking to the people that agree with you, then you're not effectively lobbying or advocating. So it makes a delightful Thanksgiving.
It does.
Discuss politics.
Where can they go for more information on that, Frank?
Discussing politics, they can go to the Daily Caller, Google Frank Ritchie, or watch Fox News and thank our president for making this great country great again. That's it. Everybody, happy Thanksgiving.
On that note, take care, everybody. Thanks for watching today.
Dave, take us off.
Happy Thanksgiving. Happy holidays.